Content warning. Cursing.
Hello. We felt like we should add a little bit to the beginning of this episode just before you dive into it, because things have changed quite a bit in the last few weeks. We recorded this episode a few months ago, and there are some themes in it that are bizarrely relevant to our current state of affairs, where we are all self-isolating in our homes alone.
Yeah, and because of that, we decided that there should probably be a couple of little extra content warnings on this one. Some of the descriptions of like being alone and afraid and waiting for something bad to happen are just more anxiety-provoking, at least to me now, than they were when I first heard the dream. So yeah, just a little bit of context for you if you're listening to this and don't want something that's reminding you of like anxiety and uncertainty and fear of death, then maybe this is one to skip.
It is about bears, but it's also really about isolation. So,
yeah,
you know.
Being alone and afraid and waiting for things that are out of sight, but kind of probably coming for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it was funny to re-listen to this and hear ourselves debate whether it makes sense to isolate yourself when there's danger going on.
And the answer is it really depends on the threat.
It depends on the threat.
Yeah.
And it depends on what the bears really mean. So now that the bears certainly mean the COVID-19 virus, yes, we should all self-isolate.
Yeah, and with that, now you can listen to this episode and get some context for what we have just been talking about.
The dream.
Okay, so my name is Liane, and I'm sitting at a cabin on a little seat overlooking a frozen lake. Frozen, maybe. I don't know. And this dream that I had was I had landed in this like area that was supposed to be kind of plotted for a commune type situation with some friends. It was in an area that I actually grew up in, like adjacent to that. It was right on the water. And we were all excited and like having a good time. And I had a dog with me, and it was my dog. And then at some point in the dream, we realized that we were in an area that actually had a lot of bears. And so the bears were grizzly bears, and it was kind of seemingly like an infestation. Like there were just a lot of them. And we were so worried because we didn't know that before we got to this piece of land. And we were like, well, we have to make this work. This is where we live now. But then, you know, night is approaching, and you can tell that there's like this dread that kind of has set in amongst the group. For whatever reason, we decide we are going to like disperse and go to our own cabins and do our own thing, because we thought that might be safer than like being together as a group. That's right. Would that be the right thing to do with a bear? I'm not sure. But anyway, we went with it. And so night falls, and I'm just kind of sitting on a lawn. It's a very green lawn. And I was sitting there with my dog thinking about the bears. And for some reason I was like, there was like a light above us that made it so that I could see maybe from here to like maybe that tree, like, I don't know, 40 feet. Really bad at estimating those things. So I could see as far as that, but everything else was just pitch black. And behind me was my cabin. And I would like go into the cabin and like, you know, try to distract myself with everyday things like pouring a cup of water. I remember being conscious of that, being like, this is me doing normal things, pretending there aren't bears out there. But I was so scared. I was like gripped with fear. And so I end up just like sitting on the lawn and being so hyper aware of the bears roaming in the dark. Even though I couldn't hear them, I didn't actually see them. I was just aware of them. And so sitting on the lawn with my dog, so terrified. I was just petrified. I was like, this might be the night that I die. And there's nothing I can do because there's nothing you can do against a bear. And so this dog was just kind of, you know, seemingly unaffected. But I had this fear mostly for my life, but also mostly for like this dog. I was like, I really have to make sure that this dog gets out alive. Like, I hope that the dog makes it. And so to tell myself to deal with the fear, I told myself that what would happen, the worst case scenario would be, sure, it's death, but it will be a brutal death. Like the bear, if it does decide to attack you, will maul you, and it will probably last for several minutes, and it's going to be really painful and horrible, but know that you're just going to die, and hopefully the dog will get away. And so that's how I like talked myself out of like what felt like a panic that was building. That's how intense the fear was. And it worked. Like actually telling myself exactly what would happen, like step by step, made it more real in this way that I really needed it to be, I think. Because otherwise, like, my fear was just, I could tell it was building this point where it was getting away from me and I was becoming uncontrollable. And I just needed that control, I guess. And I really was so worried about the dog. So, yeah, it was really scary. I felt very, very afraid in this way that was just in my guts. It was in my body. It was almost like it was just pulsing through me. And it was a fear of death. It was an intense fear of dying that all I could do was just confront the fear and talk myself through what would happen, the thing I feared most. And then I woke up and I was so afraid still. And then eventually went back to sleep. So that's it.
What does it mean? What does it mean? What does it mean? Well, it seems definitely related to being alone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Particularly, it seems because you arrive in the day, you arrive in the scene in the day, and it's the setting that's like intentionally, like you said, it's supposed to be a commune, you know, like you're there with all your friends, you're excited and happy, like it's this space that is specifically for being shared.
Yeah.
But still, when it starts, after you've realized that there's something problematic in the setting, that there's a grizzly bear infestation
too.
Then you end up being alone. Like they decide, you know, that in the face of this like difficult, dangerous thing that they should be alone. And then even though they were there, like they're all nearby, like they're all there in this communal space, but when it comes to actually dealing with a terrifying thing, you are just there, like, with yourself. The dog, I think, is her. Also.
Yeah. I have some thoughts about the dog also being a part of her.
Okay.
But, yeah, I mean, okay, so, like, the whole setup for it, the narrative setup where they're arriving on this land as a group, like, it really, for me, is, like, about... I think like a lot of people who go through wanting that kind of situation end up having to confront at some point the fact that that is something that involves a lot of fear and a lot of conflict and a lot of working through stuff in ways that people aren't prepared for when it's like the daytime and everyone's getting along and it's like you're there and it's exciting. And then there's like some inflection point that comes where it's like, oh shit, like this is not the experience that we were all in for. And instead of working through it all together, often what happens is people break apart.
Yeah.
And then go off to their own place, even though the thing that would get you through that, like, even within the dream is so interesting. Like, her being like, is that what you're supposed to do with bears? Like, fuck no, obviously. Like, this is the standard horror movie moment that everyone is screaming at the TV.
Why are you going off by yourself?
Don't split up, you idiots.
Yeah.
It's like in Cabin in the Woods, the one guy who, like, is, you know, lucid the whole time and is like, obviously we shouldn't split up. Like,
yeah. You're right. That's a classic, like a dumb horror movie. The terrifying thing that cannot happen unless you're alone. But people always weirdly make this choice.
And, you know, and that I feel like this dream has made me realize that that trope in horror movies is more than just a simple plot device to split people up. It is an impulse that people have, I think, of like, I'm scared, instead of actually like, you know, strength in numbers, figuring it out together, going through what would be necessary to coordinate, I'm going to isolate. Yeah. You know, it's like when you're getting
easy
depressed.
For me to go and make myself, like, to barricade myself in my own space where I know where everything is and I know what I'm supposed to do. And like,
even if you think a couple steps further and realize that that's the way that you die. Yeah. You know, that's the thing that kills you.
You only get that far.
Yeah. You only get to the point where you're like, well, it'll be more controllable if I'm by myself.
Yeah.
Because a group of people, it feels very out of control.
Yeah. When it's a whole other level of things to manage.
Yeah. I wonder if it was specific friends that she had in mind in the dream. Like, was it a particular group who she had some of those feelings about? Or was that kind of like a placeholder for a general feeling?
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't thinking... I hadn't taken it to be, like, about a group, like, her relationship to a group of people and wanting that group to be cohesive and also having this impulse to be alone. I just felt like it was more, you know, everybody wants to be around people and it's fun to be around people and friends, but then when things are hard.
Yeah. You end up by yourself. Yeah. And again, like, to me, in the dream, the message is really like, that's not what should happen.
That is not.
You know, the better plan would have been to push through the fact that it's hard with other people and realize that that's actually the right thing to do. It's like, you're gonna be safer. You know? It's like a bear is way less likely to attack a big group. You know? Obviously. Yeah. Oh. Yeah.
It's a bad choice.
But yeah, the aloneness, the dog being a part of herself. Do you have particular ideas about what the dog means?
Well, once we had passed the fact that it was a bad choice to go and be alone, then there's this whole struggle about, do I try to distract myself? Do I try to, like, put off the inevitable? Like, I'm deeply, deeply terrified about this very specific thing happening.
Yeah.
And I need to protect this dog. And like, this is really, you know, and she tries to do general activities to like take her mind off it, but ends up just having to sit with this reality. And I think it's really cool that the way she gets through that is by actually just kind of going through it in her mind, like giving it to, like, because I think that's really true in a lot of situations. Like, what you're actually, like, you're the most terrified and like messed up and paralyzed by a situation before you can look at it, because once you look at it, then there becomes like details come into focus that, and you can break it into like bite-sized pieces that are actually manageable.
It gives you something to work with.
And I think that, so like by the time she's going through this like vivid imagination of like what it's going to be like to die really brutally, and realizing that although that process is going to be really hard, at least the dog will escape. I feel like the dog is really her true self, and like the her that's thinking about it is like all of her troubles and anxieties and overthinking and fear of, you know, being alone, or fear of whatever threats might be present for her right now as she's having this dream. Like the part of her, like there's some elements of her life like that are happening right now that are like difficult and fraught, and she's spending a lot of energy thinking about. But when she just like starts to tease them apart, like sits alone with them on the lawn in this weird little spotlight, teases them apart, sees them for like what they actually are, then that whole element is going to vanish. Like that part of her is just going to die, and like the dog part is going to get away. And then she'll be like, the dog is like her actual true self that has like gotten out of the situation because her like twisted, challenged, tense parts of herself are going to just end as soon as she brings them into the light.
Out of the light, into the dark. Because the bears are in the darkness. But yes, I don't know how that affects this. But I do, that's really interesting. I hadn't teased it all the way to that. I got as far in my head as thinking about the dog as being, and this is maybe a bit of a slight departure from what you're saying, but I was thinking about her and the dog as being two parts of herself. I was kind of thinking about it along the lines of the dog being like, kind of the impulse side of yourself, like your instincts, your, like almost the moral childlike part, like the not socially conditioned part as much. And I think that I think all of that because I remember when I was like 13 and I had like a set of dream reading cards and I was always interpreting my own dreams. I remember very vividly this dream where I was wrestling with a white husky, and that I remember doing the interpretation with these dream cards afterwards, and it describing that dogs are like, you know, in this one, whatever. It was like dogs are basically what I just described. It's like the uninhibited part of yourself. And so it was like in that child dream that I had when I was 13, it was like I was wrestling with the uninhibited part and trying to like, you know, subdue it. As you do when you're going through puberty and becoming self-conscious in the world.
Yep.
And, you know, and here thinking about that, it fits with what you're saying of like Liane, the human Liane in the dream is the social conditioning and like the rational brain coming in to be like, I'm taking control of this situation and I'm understanding the parts and I'm making decisions. And then the dog's just there, like along for the ride of it. But like she's wanting to protect that part because it's kind of like, it's the part that feels like
it's the her-ness.
It's the her-ness.
Yeah. And like that, I think that kind of, that kind of matches. Cause I think like the conscious part of the social conditioned part of yourself, like that changes so much situation to situation and challenge to challenge, like how you're responding, what decisions you're making, like what you're thinking, like what your anxieties are. Like what you're choosing to think about or do, or, you know, that is like constantly, it's not that personal and it's constantly changing, and it'll be super different in 10 years than it was 10 years ago for you. Yeah. But that like, that essential part of yourself that's just like your, I don't know. Yeah. Character or something.
Is it the character? What is it?
I don't know. It's just like you existing. Like,
it's just your existy part. Your flowy without thinky part.
And that's just gonna keep going. You'll like get through whatever like shitty situation you're in, and that part will still just be running along. Old doggy dog.
Yeah. To me, it feels like the part that you enter into when you're in like silly playful mode. You know, it's like silly playful mode. You can get into silly playful mode when you're like a toddler. You get into silly playful mode when you're an adult. You get into silly playful mode when you're an old person. And like, there's some part of that energy that stays the same across a lifetime, I think. Whereas the ways that it gets filtered and expressed are going to shift depending on context and all of that. Yeah. So what are the bears?
Just general bad stuff.
Just bad stuff. Bears get a really bad place in dreams for the most part, I think.
Well, they just tear you apart. I mean, grizzly bears literally do that. Yeah. They just tear stuff apart. Yeah. They're very aggressive. They like to eat humans. No.
I mean, they don't though. They don't. When a grizzly bear is feeling threatened or is wanting to eat a human, like what she describes is like, you're not, it's gonna be really difficult to get out of that situation without a lot of luck. Bear attacks, not something.
And it's interesting to me that they're also just like, they don't see them. They don't,
or hear them.
Doesn't even hear them.
They never appear visually at all. They're in the blackness, and it's not, you don't even hear them rustling. She just knows they're there.
Yeah. And also, it's not that in this dream she gets eaten by bears and the dog gets away. Like, the bears never appear. Like, all it takes is for her to realize that if she dies by the bears, that this other part is gonna be fine.
That it will be fine, yeah.
Like, that's all that it takes is just realizing that.
Yeah. Yeah, something that I thought was interesting was that, you know, it's like she talked about how there's this, it's the fear of dying, you know, and it's a visceral fear, it's a deep fear. And what she needed was to confront the fear, but she doesn't go confront the bears. You know, it's like we're in a dreamscape. Anything can happen. So you think that part of confronting that fear of death would be literally confronting it, but she's meta confronting it.
Yeah.
She's only confronting it in her own mind and thinking through what it might be like to confront that thing. That's like, and I get how that is confronting a thing because often that's all we need to do. It's like you said earlier, it's like when you're not looking directly at the thing, you don't have anything to work with and it just kind of grows and grows. It's like a monster in the closet. It's scary, 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 scary. You don't even want to look at it. You're paralyzed by it. And then you open the closet. There's nothing there. Or maybe there is something there. Maybe there is a scary person there who wants to kill you. But hopefully not. But even if that's the case, it's better to look at it and then be able to respond to the situation and do something about it than to just be like waiting and assuming that maybe something bad is there.
Yeah.
And here it's like she's going through the process in her mind of like being in bed, looking at the closet, being scared of the closet, and then thinking about what will happen if there is something bad in the closet.
Yeah.
Like the worst case scenario. But she doesn't go open the closet.
No.
She doesn't walk into the dark.
No.
Should she? Like, I guess the outcome that she wants within the dream is not for her. Like, we're saying it would maybe be good for this, you know, anxiety-ridden part of her to get killed by the bear so that the dog can escape and be free. But, like, she doesn't want that within the dream.
No. But I think also, like, realizing that that would be okay. Because I think she kind of comes to terms with that being okay.
She's still scared, but yeah, there is some acceptance of that possibility for sure.
Yeah. I just feel like she's not nearly as freaking out once she realizes that that is how it would go.
Yeah.
And I think that that maybe is just because you can't always, like, in real life, you know, you can't always, like, look in the closet.
Yeah. And you sometimes shouldn't either.
Yeah.
Maybe? Is that true? I don't know if that's true. I mean, in this dream, I think it's true that it's like you don't need to go, just because you're scared of a thing, you don't need to go fight it.
Well, yeah, like, say you're, like, worried about, I don't know, I gotta think of an example. Like, you're worried about, like, doing something stupid and losing your job.
Yeah.
Say. You're not gonna, like, do something stupid so that you lose your job so that you know what that feels like.
Yeah.
You're gonna go through the scenario and, like, think, oh, so if I did something stupid and I did lose my job, then I would just, like, get my resume ready and, like, apply some more jobs and I'd, you know, like, you know, maybe I'd be able to save money this way and in a few months I would have a new job and it'd be fine. Like, you go through it in your mind and that's what saves you from it.
Yeah.
You don't have to actually do the thing.
It's like, it's when you don't go through those steps and realize that you will ultimately probably be fine on some level, you know? If you don't do that, that's when the panic makes you do dumb shit like run out into the darkness and fight the bear.
Yeah.
It's like that, yeah.
Yeah, like you
thinking through it.
Just, like, makes the necessary part, like, makes the part of it of actually going through the experiment unnecessary.
Yeah. Yeah, because a lot of the time the experiment's not one that you actually need to
run.
run.
Like, panic is when you do dumb stuff.
Yeah.
And thinking through it gets the panic kind of quelled a bit.
Yeah. I wonder, you know, what... Like, I actually imagine in this dream, because the bears never do attack, that if she had been able to sleep through it, in the morning, it would have been fine. You know? It's like, if she hadn't woken up in the middle of that, she wouldn't have woken up with, like, a ominous feeling. I don't know. It's like, I imagine her sitting through the night, like, not being able to, like, chill out, but, like, sitting there tense, never actually sees or hears a bear. The sun comes up. The feeling of dread lifts, as it does in the morning when you're, like, really scared for, you know, these vague reasons. And then going and, like, kind of regrouping with all of these people who've been in their separate cabins and hopefully all together being like, man, why did we split up? That didn't make sense. We should probably, you know. I feel like I'm in a different camp. Weirdly, like, more... I'm taking the whole split. Like, I just feel like she needed to be on her own to go through that. Like, I think the group thing, like, I'm like, I hear what you're saying about it, but, like, to me, it's like she's going through something personally. Yeah. And while, like, having this group is, like, useful or whatever, like, until she's on her own and, like, goes through that worst case scenario because it's so terrifying. She's getting close enough to the scary part. Yeah.
to actually need to go through that,
Yeah.
like, mind route of, like, figuring out how it would be if the worst case scenario came to be. Like, she needs to go through that process in order to not have that fear, like, kind of looming behind her all the time.
Right.
And she wouldn't have done that if she'd stayed with the group. And I think that sometimes you need to, like, just isolate yourself to, like,
Figure it out.
yeah, figure out what's
Confront
going
the things.
on inside your
Okay,
dark parts
but
of your brain.
now that she's had that experience, now that they've gone through that learning, each individually, these people, do you not think that then the, like, reasonable thing after that is to be like, now let's address some of the things that we've learned through this process of confronting?
Yeah, I mean, I just
Or
don't
did they
think
just
the
go
dream
through
is
it
about the
every
group at all.
night? Right. I guess I'm like,
But
I'm
that's
just
also
reading it
just
like a
like-
plot, you know?
Yeah, this is weird because I feel like you're taking like the literal story of it, and I'm taking it like it's a
true.
metaphor.
What's going on
I
there?
don't
Freaky
know.
Friday.
It's a little so true.
On a Tuesday. It's Tuesday today.
Freaky Friday on a Tuesday.
In Freaky Friday, I feel like you'd be the mom and I would be the daughter.
Wait, before or after they switch bodies?
Before. So then, when we switch bodies, I would be in the mom body, but a teenager, and you would be in the daughter body. But
Oh yeah, 100%.
Okay.
You're absolutely
I'm glad we
right.
agree on that.
Definitely.
It would have been awkward if you'd been like, I'm obviously your daughter.
I've been 40. I've been 40 since I was like 8.
And I've been 5 for my whole life.
Yeah.
Okay, well,
I mean, I think in a real situation with bears in the wood, like, yeah, stay in a group.
yeah. I guess I just want to see the dream through further. And to me, the next step is like going beyond the isolation. But I get it. I think sometimes you need your own personal quest. Totally.
Well, maybe the sequel to this dream will be her the next day when she gets to talk about how they all survived. Or maybe
they all die.
Yeah, maybe she's the only
every
one left.
single one of them dies. And
No,
it's
maybe
just
she
dogs.
just lives. Yeah, in the
It becomes
dog
Dog
world.
Kingdom.
That's how that movie started.
Yeah, about all the Wes Anderson one.
Yeah, I haven't seen it.
I haven't seen it either. It's probably what it's about, though.
I think probably.
This is the prequel.
He probably had this dream.
Yeah. Wow. Maybe Liane and Wes Anderson share a dream.
If only we could ask him
Hey, Wes, give us a call.
if you've had Leanne's dream also.
Or just in general, we'd be open to the call.
Yeah, I'd be open to any dream from you.
Yeah.
Maybe we should just start interpreting his movies as if they're actually just his dreams.
This will be a dream interpretation podcast and also a Wes Anderson movie interpretation podcast. Baseless in both cases.
Yes.
Thank you for listening.
Help us keep making this by subscribing to and reviewing the podcast wherever you listen to it, and following and liking us on social media.
If you love this, you can support us on Patreon.
We will reward you.